In the bleak depths of the prison, where the silence is as thick as fear, there are inmates who inspire terror in a way few can imagine. These men are not just criminals, they are legends of horror, whose atrocities have left an indelible mark on society's collective psyche. Today, we invite you to peer into a dark and fascinating world where its chilling stories unfold before your eyes. Imagine the tension in the air as we explore the faces behind the most heinous crimes, those that have made both the public and their own cellmates tremble. If you thought you knew everything about serial killers, get ready to discover the chilling phases that these monsters go through, revealing what is really hidden behind their icy gazes. Don't dare look away, and if you like this type of content, subscribe to our channel. It's free. Number 10. Thomas Edward Silverstein. Thomas Edward Silverstein was born on February 4th, 1952, in Long Beach, California. From a young age, he faced challenges that would shape his notorious life. Her mother, Virginia Conway, divorced her first husband while she was pregnant and later married Thomas Conway, whom Silverstein believed to be her biological father. After this marriage ended, Virginia married Sid Silverstein, who legally adopted Thomas. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood, Silverstein was shy and often bullied. Virginia instilled in him a harsh lesson. If he returned home crying after a fight, he would face punishment from her. This taught him to defend himself, although in a way that would lead him to a life filled with violence. At just 19 years old, Silverstein was imprisoned for armed robbery, serving 4 years in San Quentin prison. However, his brief experience of freedom was short-lived. He soon found himself arrested again, this time with family members for multiple armed robberies. In 1977, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison and ended up in the United States Penitentiary in Leavenworth, Kansas. Here, he became associated with the Aryan Brotherhood, a neo-Nazi gang known for its violent criminal activities. In 1980, Silverstein's life took a darker turn when he was convicted of the murder of an inmate named Danny Atwell, who had allegedly refused to bring heroin into the prison. This conviction earned him a life sentence and led to his transfer to the high-security prison facility at USP Marion, Illinois, where he lived under constant surveillance. His life there was marked by violence and more infamy. He received additional sentences of life in prison for murdering other inmates and even a correctional officer. The most shocking of these incidents was the brutal stabbing of correctional officer Merle Cutts, orchestrated by Silverstein himself with the help of other inmates. By the time of his death on May 11, 2019, Silverstein had spent 36 years in solitary confinement, solidifying his reputation as one of the most feared inmates in the American prison system. He died due to complications following heart surgery, leaving behind a legacy of violence and brutality. Now, this prisoner in the picture was known as the Titan. He towered over even the toughest officers with chains around his waist that struck fear into even the bravest of hearts. The stories about his past crimes were so terrible they were hard to believe. Number 9. Nico Allen Jenkins. Nico Allen Jenkins, born September 16, 1986 in Omaha, Nebraska, is a name that sends shivers down the spines of many. His early life was marked by violence, and after a series of tumultuous events, he found himself in prison for car theft, serving just over 10 years. Unfortunately, Jenkins's mental health issues were largely unaddressed during his incarceration, leaving him to deal with his demons alone. Upon his release on July 30, 2013, the lack of supervision proved catastrophic. Just 2 weeks after regaining his freedom, Jenkins went on a chilling killing spree that shook Omaha to its core. He lured 2 men, Jubana, 26, and Jorge C. Cajiga Ruiz, 25, to a secluded area under the pretext of a meeting. In a shocking act of brutality, he shot them in the head and robbed them, leaving their bodies abandoned in a van. Jenkins didn't stop there. His third victim was a fellow inmate named Curtis Bradford, whom he murdered just one day after taking a friendly photo with him. Jenkins's most heinous act occurred when he shot Andrea Kruger, a 33-year-old mother of three, with a 12-gauge shotgun, leaving her lifeless in the road. The gruesome nature of his crimes was captured on surveillance recordings that led to his capture on August 30th, 2013. The lack of supervision proved catastrophic. Just 2 weeks after regaining his freedom, Jenkins went on a chilling killing spree that shook Omaha to its core. He lured two men, Ju Bana, 26, and Jorge C. Cajiga Ruiz, 25, to a secluded area under the pretext of a meeting. In a shocking act of brutality, he shot them in the head and robbed them, leaving their bodies abandoned in a van. Jenkins didn't stop there. His third victim was a fellow inmate named Curtis Bradford, whom he murdered just one day after taking a friendly photo with him. Jenkins's most heinous act occurred when he shot Andrea Kruger, a 33-year-old mother of three, with a 12-gauge shotgun, leaving her lifeless in the road. The gruesome nature of his crimes was captured on surveillance recordings that led to his capture on August 30th, 2013. During extensive interrogation, Jenkins offered a chilling confession, claiming that he was influenced by an ancient serpent god named Apis, adding a bizarre twist to an already horrific story. His trial was a spectacle of unpredictability. Jenkins chose to represent himself and acted erratically, speaking in tongues and laughing during testimonies from his victims' families. He was eventually sentenced to death, sparking renewed debate over the treatment of inmates with mental health problems in the prison system. For many, Jenkins became a symbol of terror, with echoes of his actions reverberating through the community and leaving families devastated and grieving. Number 8. Alvin Francis Karpis. Alvin Francis Karpis, born Alvin Francis Karpavicius on August 10, 1907, was a Canadian-American criminal of Lithuanian descent, whose life of crime began at a young age. By the time he was 10, Karpis was already involved with gamblers, smugglers, and various shady characters. His formal entry into the world of crime came at the age of 19, when he was sentenced to 10 years in prison for attempted robbery. However, Karpis managed to escape and joined fellow inmates to continue his life of crime, including a notorious association with Fred Barker at the Kansas State Penitentiary. Together, they formed the infamous Barker-Karpis gang, specializing in bank robberies, kidnappings, and violent crimes. Karpis quickly gained a reputation for his brutality, especially after the gang's involvement in the murder of Sheriff C. Roy Kelly, which further cemented his status as a formidable figure in organized crime. The Barker-Karpis gang's reign of terror came to a quick end in 1936 after a series of violent encounters with law enforcement. His capture was highly publicized, particularly after the kidnapping of Edward Bremer, which attracted the attention of President Franklin Roosevelt and intensified the FBI's hunt for Karpis and his gang. After being arrested on May 1, 1936 in New Orleans, Karpis faced a quick trial and was sentenced to life in prison. He spent an astonishing 26 years on Alcatraz, where he became one of the longest-serving inmates. Released on parole in 1969, Karpis faced a world that had changed dramatically since he was imprisoned. He was no longer feared as a master criminal and struggled to adapt to life outside prison walls. Eventually deported to Canada, he faced challenges due to his previous criminal history, which prevented him from obtaining a passport. In search of a quiet life, he moved to Spain, where he died on August 26, 1979. Initially considered a suicide, his death was later determined to be caused by natural causes, thus closing the chapter on a life defined by crime and notoriety. Number 7. Charles Bronson. Michael Gordon Peterson, popularly known as Charles Bronson, was born on December 6, 1952. He is notorious for being one of the most feared figures in the history of British prisons. His story begins in a tumultuous childhood that laid the foundation for his later violent tendencies. From a young age, Bronson showed a penchant for aggression, engaging in street fights that cemented his reputation as a formidable combatant. His transition into the criminal world escalated dramatically in 1974 when he attempted to rob a post office in Luton, armed with a sawed-off shotgun. Bronson found himself in a violent shootout with police, wounding several officers before his eventual capture. The trial that followed showed not only his erratic behavior, but also his complete disregard for authority. He disrupted court proceedings, assaulted prison guards, and exhibited angry outbursts that earned him a reputation as an unpredictable and dangerous criminal. Number 6. Richard Lee McNair. Richard Lee McNair, born December 19, 1958, is not your typical criminal. His criminal career is highlighted by a series of daring prison escapes that have earned him a place in infamy. McNair's journey into the world of crime began with a botched robbery that resulted in a murder conviction in 1987. Instead of resigning himself to a life behind bars, McNair became obsessed with escaping, displaying a remarkable talent for evading capture that would soon become the stuff of legend. His first escape was nothing less than a magician's trick. McNair managed to throw off his shackles using only lip balm and sheer force of will. Although he was recaptured, this initial feat only fueled his desire for freedom. 4 years later, he executed a second escape, sailing through the ventilation shafts like a ghost gliding through the night. But it was his third escape, in April 2006, that solidified his status as a master of evasion. In a daring act, McNair hid among stacks of used mailbags, leaving law enforcement baffled. When an officer finally spotted him as he ran near the train tracks, McNair was quick on his feet, making up a story about simply exercising and claiming he was staying at a nearby hotel. His ability to think quickly allowed him to slip away again, and he even managed to reach Canada, where he continued to evade the authorities. McNair's escapades caught the attention of law enforcement, placing him on Canada's 15 most wanted list on multiple occasions. However, his luck ran out in late 2007 when an observant officer recognized a suspicious van, leading to a chase that ended with McNair's capture. Today he resides at ADX Florence, a supermax prison known for its strict security measures, where inmates spend 23 hours a day in solitary confinement. Despite his current situation, McNair's legacy as a cunning escape artist continues to capture the imagination of many, embodying the notion that some criminals are always one step ahead of the law. Number 5. Charles Edmund Cullen. Charles Edmund Cullen is perhaps one of the most chilling examples of betrayal in a profession dedicated to healing. As a nurse who worked in several New Jersey hospitals, Cullen hid his horrendous crimes behind the trust that comes from caring for the sick. Over 16 years, he confessed to having ended the lives of 40 patients, with 29 confirmed murders. The idea that someone charged with saving lives was actually taking them is a disturbing reality that sent shockwaves through the medical community. Cullen's nightmare began to unravel on December 12, 2003, when he was finally arrested, initially facing charges for murder and attempted murder. The seriousness of his crimes soon became evident during interrogation. Cullen confessed to killing 2 patients at Somerset Medical Center and ominously suggested that the true number of his victims could be as high as 40. The courtroom drama intensified when he showed no remorse for his actions, even taunting the judge during the proceedings. In April 2004, Cullen pleaded guilty to 13 murders and 2 attempted murders, all committed by lethal injections. In a controversial plea deal, prosecutors spared him the death penalty in exchange for his cooperation. As part of this agreement, Cullen agreed to help identify more of his victims, shedding light on the disturbing question of how a person can betray the oath to do no harm. On March 2, 2006, he was sentenced to 11 consecutive life sentences and now remains incarcerated at the New Jersey State Prison in Trenton, with no chance of parole until he reaches the age of 443. His legacy serves as a dark reminder of the fragility of trust in environments meant to foster healing. Number 4. Lucy Letby. Lucy Letby, born the 4th of January 1990, has emerged as one of the most notorious figures in recent British history, now infamously known as one of the most prolific juvenile murderers. Her career as a neonatal nurse began in 2011 at Chester Hospital, where she initially received praise for her dedication and care towards vulnerable babies. However, this perception was soon transformed when a disturbing pattern of deaths began to develop in the neonatal unit where Letby worked. Concerns were raised by Dr. Ravi Gam, a senior doctor at the hospital, who noted an alarming rise in baby deaths and serious health crises linked to Letby. Despite her attempts to alert hospital authorities in 2015 and 2016, her warnings were largely ignored, resulting in devastating consequences for the infants in Letby's care. As the death toll continued to rise, his colleagues began to notice disturbing behavior. They described her as dismissive and even hostile during critical moments, raising further alarm about her possible involvement. In May 2017, Chester Police launched an investigation into alarming incidents within the neonatal unit. By July 2018, Letby was arrested, marking a significant turning point in the investigation. His trial, which began in October 2022 at Manchester High Court, revealed chilling evidence against him. Handwritten notes found at her residence showed a problematic self-image, with Letby describing herself in harsh terms. Despite facing 22 charges, he maintained his innocence, stating that he had always strived to provide the best care possible. The prosecution presented a compelling case, alleging that Letby had deliberately caused harm to at least 12 infants through lethal means such as air injections. After a long 10-month trial, on August 18, 2023, the jury found her guilty on 14 of the 22 counts. She was sentenced to a life imprisonment order for each offense, ensuring she would remain behind bars for the rest of her life. The chilling case of Lucy Letby has left a profound impact on the medical community and the public, leading to a re-evaluation of practices and protocols within neonatal care to prevent such a horrific tragedy from happening again. Number 3. Rodney Alcala. Rodney Alcala's life is a heartbreaking story of violence that began in San Antonio, Texas, on August 23, 1943. Born Rodrigo Jax Alcala, his childhood was tumultuous, marked by abandonment and turmoil. When his family moved to Los Angeles, Alcala's troubled life continued to spiral out of control. He enlisted in the military at just 17 years old in search of purpose, but was discharged after a short period due to a breakdown and a subsequent diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder. What a challenging role! Despite his disturbing past, Alcala managed to present a charming and charismatic facade, which he exploited to attract unsuspecting women. Pursuing his passion for photography, he adopted the alias John Berger in New York, where he promised glamorous opportunities to potential victims. Tragically, this was just a trap. Among his first known victims was 23-year-old Cornelia Krill, who was brutally raped and strangled in June 1971. Another victim, Ellen Hoover, disappeared in July 1977 after agreeing to meet Alcala, an encounter that would cost him his life. Alcala's chilling confessions in 2012 confirmed his involvement in the murders of both Cornelia Krill and Ellen Hoover, among others. Although he received a sentence of 25 years to life in prison, the scars of his actions persist, haunting the families and communities affected by his violence. Despite his eventual capture, the darkness of Alcala's crimes continues to resonate, leaving a painful legacy that reminds us of the dangers that can hide behind a charming smile. Number 2. John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy remains one of the most notorious figures in the annals of crime, striking terror into the hearts of even the toughest inmates. His childhood was marked by an abusive father, which paved the way for a life filled with deceit and horror. After a brief stint in prison in 1968, Gacy escalated into a much darker existence. Between 1972 and 1978, he became a predator, luring young girls to his home, where he committed unspeakable acts of violence. Gacy's facade as a successful businessman and community clown allowed him to hide the sinister impulses lurking beneath the surface. When authorities finally excavated the grounds of his property, they discovered a macabre mass grave containing the remains of 26 young men, revealing the magnitude of his heinous crimes. The investigation relied heavily on dental records and x-rays, making identifying the victims a painful process that underscored the horror of Gacy's actions. His trial in 1980 captivated the nation, revealing a complex interplay between the claims of multiple personalities and the prosecutor's portrayal of a calculating killer. Despite Gacy's attempts to present himself as a victim of his own psychology, the evidence against him was overwhelming. He was ultimately convicted of 33 counts of murder, bringing a sense of closure to the victims' families, but leaving an indelible mark of fear on the community. Gacy's legacy continues to haunt Norwood Park Township and those affected by his horrendous crimes, reminding us of the darkness that can hide behind a seemingly ordinary life. Number 1. Dennis Rader, infamously known as the BTK Killer. He was born in Kansas in 1945. From an early age, he harbored dark fantasies of torturing and murdering women, but it was not until January 1974 that he would inflict unimaginable horror on innocent families. His first victims were the Otero family: Joseph Otero, 38 years old, Julie Otero, 33, and their 2 children, Joseph Jr. and Josephine, only 11 years old. Rader's brutality was shocking. He tied up, tortured, and killed the entire family, marking the beginning of a horrific series of murders that kept the community in a state of fear. The terror did not end with the Oteros. In April 1974, Rader struck again, this time targeting 21-year-old Catherine Bright. He employed his cruel methods once again, tying her up and strangling her before leaving her for dead. Over the next few years, he continued his reign of terror with victims such as Maureen Hedge and Vicky Wegerle, all while maintaining a facade of normality. By day, Rader was a respected member of his community, serving as president of Christ Lutheran Church and leader of the Cub Scouts, effectively hiding his monstrous side under a veneer of respectability. As the number of bodies increased, the pressure on law enforcement intensified. Rader's insatiable desire for attention ultimately led to his downfall in 2005, after sending a floppy disk to a television station detailing his next intended victim. Investigators were able to trace it back to him. His capture sent shockwaves across the country as the man behind the infamous BTK moniker was finally brought to justice. In a chilling conclusion, Rader was charged with 10 murders and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Today, he resides at the El Dorado Correctional Center in Kansas, where his horrific legacy lives on in the minds of those who lived through his terror. Each of these criminals is undoubtedly deadly. Which of these prisoners do you find most terrifying? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe for more great stories like this. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Ching.